The night the Alpha King chose another woman was the night he unknowingly lost the only person who ever truly understood him. The grand halls of Silvermoon Palace had never been filled with such anticipation. Thousands of candles illuminated the royal chamber as nobles, leaders, and powerful families gathered to witness the most important announcement of the year. At the center of it all stood Adrian Blackwood, the Alpha King of Silvermoon, a ruler respected across the entire kingdom. His name carried authority. His presence commanded attention. To the world, he was everything an Alpha King should be: powerful, composed, and impossible to challenge. But behind the crown was a man who had spent years carrying responsibilities no one else could see. Few people knew the quiet moments when the weight of the throne became overwhelming. Even fewer knew the one person who could make those moments easier. Emma Whitmore was an Omega who had never belonged among the powerful families of Silvermoon. She had no influential name, no position in court, and no reason for the nobles to notice her. Yet she possessed something rare. She saw people for who they truly were. While others saw the Alpha King, Emma saw Adrian. She noticed when he was exhausted after endless meetings. She remembered the small things everyone else ignored. She offered kindness without expecting recognition. And for years, Adrian had quietly depended on her presence more than he realized. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, tradition demanded a choice. The kingdom expected the Alpha King to choose a partner who represented strength, status, and political influence. The nobles believed the future of Silvermoon depended on a powerful alliance. Standing beside Adrian was Victoria Hayes, the alpha woman from one of the most respected families in the kingdom. She was admired by the court. She represented everything tradition valued. Emma stood among the crowd, watching silently as the moment arrived. A small part of her hoped Adrian would finally see what had always been there. But when Adrian announced his decision, the room erupted with approval. He had chosen Victoria. The cheers of the nobles filled the chamber, but Emma heard only silence. She looked at Adrian one final time. Their eyes met across the room, and for a brief moment, he saw something he had never expected to see. Not anger, not resentment, just quiet acceptance. Emma had spent years standing beside him without asking for anything. She had supported him when nobody else noticed his struggles. She had believed that someday he would understand. But she realized she could not continue waiting for someone who had already made his choice. That night, Emma did not argue. She did not demand an explanation. She simply walked away. Adrian believed she would always be there. He believed the gentle Omega who understood him better than anyone would remain exactly where he left her. He did not know that some people only realize the value of something after it is gone. And he did not know that the quiet footsteps leaving the palace that night were the beginning of losing the one person who had always seen him beyond the crown. The days after Emma Whitmore disappeared from Silvermoon Palace felt strangely different, even though the kingdom continued moving as if nothing had changed. The celebrations continued. The nobles praised the Alpha King's decision. The court admired the future they believed had been secured. But inside the palace walls, something important was missing. Adrian Blackwood noticed it first in the quietest moments. There was no longer a gentle voice reminding him to take a break after long meetings. There was no one leaving a warm cup of tea beside his documents without saying a word. There was no one who looked at him and saw Adrian instead of the Alpha King. At first, he convinced himself that nothing had changed. Emma was kind. Emma was patient. Emma would understand. That was what he believed because she had always been there before. But each passing day revealed a truth he had never considered. Emma had not stayed because she had no choice. She stayed because she cared. And now that she was gone, Adrian began to understand the difference. Victoria Hayes stood beside him during royal events, perfectly prepared and respected by the court. She understood traditions. She understood the expectations placed on an Alpha King. To the nobles, she seemed like the ideal choice. But Adrian slowly realized that being admired was not the same as being understood. Victoria knew how to stand beside the crown, but Emma had always known how to stand beside the person wearing it. One evening, Adrian walked through the palace gardens alone. The same paths where Emma once spoke to him without fear now felt unfamiliar. He stopped near the place where they used to talk, and remembered the small moments he had overlooked. The way she listened when he was overwhelmed. The way she encouraged him when he doubted himself. The way she never asked for anything in return. For years, Adrian had believed Emma would always remain close. He had mistaken her loyalty for certainty. He had mistaken her kindness for something that would never disappear. But now the empty gardens reminded him of a painful truth. Even the most patient hearts could eventually walk away. Ethan Caldwell, Adrian's closest guard, noticed the change in the Alpha King. "You seem distracted," Ethan said carefully. Adrian looked toward the quiet path ahead. "I did not realize how much she was part of my life until she was no longer here." Ethan remained silent because he understood. Everyone in the palace had seen Emma's kindness, but few had understood her importance. She had been the person who helped Adrian carry the invisible weight of leadership. Meanwhile, far away from the palace, Emma began creating a new life for herself. She did not leave because she hated Adrian. She left because she finally understood that loving someone did not mean losing herself while waiting to be chosen. For the first time, she focused on her own dreams, her own peace, and the future she had placed aside for too long. Adrian still believed he could fix what had happened. He believed there would be time to explain, time to apologize, and time to bring Emma back. But he did not yet understand the greatest lesson of all. Some people do not leave because they stop caring. Sometimes they leave because they finally learn they deserve to be cared for too. And as the distance between them grew, the Alpha King began facing the one truth he had never prepared for. The person he thought would always wait for him was the very person he could no longer find. Months passed in Silvermoon Kingdom, but the absence of Emma Whitmore continued to leave a space that no celebration could fill. Adrian Blackwood remained the Alpha King everyone expected him to be. He attended meetings, made decisions, and carried the responsibilities of the throne with the same discipline as always. To the outside world, nothing had changed, but those closest to him noticed the difference. The confidence in his voice remained, but the peace behind it was gone. Adrian had spent his entire life believing that being a strong leader meant putting duty above everything else. He believed personal feelings could wait. He believed there would always be another chance to say what needed to be said. But Emma's disappearance forced him to face a truth he had avoided for too long. Some moments only come once. Every corner of the palace reminded him of her presence. The library where she once helped him organize endless documents. The gardens where she spoke to him like he was not a king. The quiet halls where she offered encouragement when the pressure became overwhelming. The memories were not grand moments from royal ceremonies. They were simple moments that Adrian had once considered ordinary. Now they were the moments he missed the most. Victoria Hayes noticed the distance growing between them. Although she had everything the court believed a future Luna should have, she could feel that Adrian's heart was somewhere else. She had expected the crown to bring them closer, but she realized that a position could never replace a genuine connection. One evening she spoke honestly with Adrian. "You chose what the kingdom expected," Victoria said quietly, "but I do not think you chose what your heart needed." Adrian remained silent because he knew there was truth in her words. For the first time, he stopped blaming circumstances and started accepting his own mistake. He had not lost Emma because someone took her away. He lost her because he failed to recognize what he already had. Meanwhile, Emma had created a peaceful life far from the palace. She lived in a small countryside community where people valued kindness more than status. There, she was not known as the Omega who stood near the Alpha King. She was simply Emma. She helped families, supported neighbors, and built a life where her worth was never questioned. But even though she had found peace, she still carried memories of the past. She remembered Adrian before the crown became the center of every decision. She remembered the moments when he allowed himself to be honest and vulnerable. She did not hate him. She simply accepted that she could not continue waiting for someone who had already chosen another path. Back in Silvermoon Palace, Adrian finally made a decision. He could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The kingdom had his loyalty, but his heart carried a truth he could not ignore. He needed to find Emma, not because he wanted to possess her or bring back the past, but because he needed to face the person he had become after losing her. Ethan Caldwell supported his choice, knowing that the journey would not be simple. "If you find her," Ethan said, "you cannot expect her to be the same person who left." Adrian understood. That was the part that frightened him most. He did not only need to find Emma, he needed to prove that he had changed. As the Alpha King prepared to leave the palace in search of the Omega who had once stood quietly beside him, the entire kingdom began to wonder what could make their ruler abandon comfort and tradition. They did not know that Adrian was not searching for someone who belonged to him. He was searching for the person who had shown him who he truly was. The journey away from Silvermoon Palace was unlike anything Adrian Blackwood had experienced before. For the first time in years, the Alpha King was not traveling as a ruler surrounded by advisors and royal guards. He was traveling as a man searching for the person he had failed to appreciate. Every mile away from the palace reminded him of the distance he had allowed to grow between himself and Emma Whitmore. The kingdom believed the Alpha King was leaving to correct a political mistake. But Adrian knew the truth. He was leaving because he finally understood the value of the one person who had never asked him for anything. As he traveled through quiet villages and peaceful countryside, Adrian saw the world differently. Before, he had viewed his kingdom through reports, meetings, and responsibilities. Now he noticed the small details Emma had always cared about. He saw families helping each other. He saw ordinary people finding happiness without wealth or status. He began understanding why Emma had always valued simple moments more than royal recognition. Meanwhile, Emma continued building her new life far from the palace. She had created a small home surrounded by nature, where every day felt calmer than the life she left behind. She no longer measured her worth by whether someone powerful noticed her. She had learned that being overlooked did not mean being unimportant. Her kindness had value even when nobody praised it. But one morning, while helping a local family prepare for a community event, Emma heard unexpected news. Travelers from Silvermoon had arrived nearby, and rumors spread that the Alpha King himself was searching for someone. Emma immediately knew who they were talking about. Her heart felt heavy, but she remained calm. She had imagined this moment many times. She had wondered what she would say if Adrian ever came looking for her. The old Emma would have run toward him without hesitation. But the woman she had become understood something different. Love was not only about waiting for someone to choose you. Love also required being valued. When Adrian finally arrived in the village, he did not appear as the untouchable Alpha King from the palace. He appeared as someone who had walked a long road to find the person he had lost. Emma saw the change immediately. There was less pride in his expression and more honesty. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them carried years of memories, regrets, and feelings left unspoken. "Emma," Adrian finally said. His voice was softer than she remembered. "I know I cannot erase what happened." Emma looked at him quietly. She had imagined an apology many times, but hearing it now felt different. "I do not want to return to the person I was before," she said. "The person who waited for someone else to realize my worth." Adrian lowered his gaze because he understood. He had come searching for Emma, but he could not expect her to return simply because he finally recognized her importance. He had to earn her trust again. "I am not here to ask you to forget," Adrian said. "I am here because I want to become someone worthy of the kindness you gave me." Those words surprised Emma. She had expected a king demanding what he believed was his. Instead, she saw a man willing to admit his mistakes. For the first time, Adrian was not standing before her with a crown. He was standing before her with honesty. And as the evening sun disappeared behind the hills, both of them realized that finding each other again was only the beginning. The Alpha King had found the Omega he lost, but now he had to prove that this time, he would never overlook her heart again. The days that followed Adrian Blackwood's arrival in the quiet countryside were unlike any chapter of his life before. The Alpha King, who once commanded the attention of an entire kingdom, now found himself learning the simple rhythm of Emma Whitmore's world. There were no grand halls, no endless meetings, and no nobles waiting for decisions. There was only the peaceful life Emma had built with patience and care. At first, Adrian struggled to understand how she had found happiness so far away from the palace. He had spent years believing that greatness came from influence, recognition, and power. But watching Emma interact with the people around her showed him something he had forgotten. A meaningful life was not created by how many people knew your name. It was created by how many hearts you touched. Emma remained cautious around Adrian. She could see that he was different from the man who had stood in the royal chamber, and made a choice that broke her heart. But she also remembered the pain of that moment. She remembered standing among the crowd and realizing that her place beside him was never guaranteed. She had forgiven him in her heart, but forgiveness did not mean forgetting. Adrian understood that. For the first time, he did not try to convince her with promises or royal authority. He simply stayed. He helped the community, listened to their stories, and learned about the life Emma had created. He saw how people respected her, not because of a title, but because of the kindness she showed every day. One afternoon, Adrian watched Emma help an elderly neighbor organize supplies for the coming winter. It was a small task that would never appear in a royal record, but to Emma it mattered. "You do this for everyone," Adrian said quietly. Emma looked at him. "Because everyone deserves someone who cares." Adrian smiled sadly. "That was always the difference between you and everyone else." Emma lowered her eyes. "What do you mean?" Adrian took a moment before answering. "Many people wanted to stand beside the Alpha King. You were the only person who cared about the man who carried the crown." The honesty in his voice made Emma pause. She had heard apologies before. She had heard explanations. But this was different. Adrian was not asking her to erase the past. He was acknowledging it. Meanwhile, news of the Alpha King's journey reached Silvermoon Kingdom. The nobles who once believed Emma was insignificant began questioning their own assumptions. They saw that Adrian's search was not about restoring an image or protecting his pride. It was about correcting a mistake that came from failing to recognize someone's true value. Victoria Hayes also began accepting the reality of what had happened. She had been chosen because she represented what the kingdom expected. But she understood that expectations could never replace a genuine connection. She respected Adrian's decision to search for the person who truly understood him. As the days passed, Emma slowly began seeing the changes in Adrian. He no longer spoke like someone who believed his title gave him answers. He listened more. He admitted when he was wrong. He allowed himself to be seen without the protection of the crown. Yet Emma still wondered if those changes would remain when he returned to Silvermoon. The palace had always been the place where he lost sight of what mattered. Adrian knew that question remained. Between them, he knew finding Emma was only the first step. The harder journey was proving that he had become someone who would never make her feel invisible again. And as the Alpha King stood beside the Omega he once lost, he realized that the greatest challenge was not winning back her heart. It was becoming worthy of the trust she once gave him freely. The quiet days in the countryside continued, and for the first time in years, Adrian Blackwood experienced a life without the constant pressure of the throne. Every morning brought a new lesson. He learned the routines Emma Whitmore had created, the people she cared for, and the simple moments that gave her peace. The Alpha King who once believed he understood responsibility began realizing that Emma had been carrying her own responsibilities quietly all along. She had supported others without recognition. She had offered kindness without expecting anything in return. And she had walked away from the palace not because she stopped caring, but because she finally chose to care about herself. Adrian admired that more than he could explain. Yet he also knew admiration was not enough. He had hurt someone who trusted him, and rebuilding that trust required more than words. One evening, as the sun began setting over the countryside, Adrian and Emma sat near the small garden behind her home. The silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt like two people slowly learning how to understand each other again. "Why did you never tell me you were unhappy?" Adrian asked. Emma looked toward the flowers around them. "Because I thought my happiness was not something you were responsible for." Adrian frowned slightly. "That is not what I mean." Emma smiled gently. "I know. But for a long time I believed that if I was patient enough, you would eventually see me. I forgot that I also needed to see myself." Her words stayed with him. Adrian realized that Emma had not only left the palace. She had left behind the version of herself who waited for someone else to recognize her worth. She had grown stronger because she learned she was valuable even without his attention. "I wish I had understood sooner," Adrian said quietly. Emma looked at him. "So do I." There was no anger in her voice, only honesty. That honesty meant more to Adrian than an easy forgiveness would have. He did not want Emma to forgive him because she was kind. He wanted to become someone who deserved forgiveness. Back in Silvermoon Kingdom, the absence of both Adrian and Emma had created uncertainty among the nobles. Many questioned the Alpha King's decision to leave the palace. Some believed he was abandoning tradition. Others began to understand that perhaps the greatest mistake was expecting a ruler to ignore his own heart forever. Ethan Caldwell continued managing royal matters while Adrian was away. He noticed something important. The kingdom had not fallen apart because the Alpha King stepped away for a short time. Instead, people began seeing a different side of leadership. A ruler did not need to be distant to be respected. Meanwhile, Emma faced her own difficult choice. Part of her missed the connection she once shared with Adrian, but another part feared returning to a place where she had once felt invisible. She wondered if the palace would change or if history would repeat itself. Adrian sensed her uncertainty. He did not ask her to return immediately. He did not demand that she trust him again. Instead, he made a promise. "I will not ask you to come back because I need you beside me," he said. "I will ask you only when I have become someone who deserves to stand beside you." For Emma, those words meant more than any grand declaration. The Alpha King who once chose what the kingdom wanted was finally learning to choose with his heart. And as they looked toward an uncertain future, both understood that their journey was no longer about what had been lost. It was about what they could build if they chose each other again. The days that followed brought a quiet change between Adrian Blackwood and Emma Whitmore. There were no grand promises made in front of the kingdom, no dramatic declarations meant to impress anyone. Instead, there were small moments that slowly rebuilt what had once been broken. Adrian understood that trust was not something he could demand as an Alpha King. It was something he had to earn as a person. Every morning, he found new ways to understand the life Emma had created away from the palace. He helped the community, listened to people's concerns, and discovered that leadership was not only about making important decisions. It was also about noticing the people who were often forgotten. Emma watched these changes carefully. She saw that Adrian was making an effort, but she also knew that true change was measured over time. She did not want to return to the past version of their relationship. She wanted something different, something built on honesty rather than hope alone. One afternoon, Adrian joined Emma while she visited families in the nearby village. He noticed how everyone greeted her with warmth and respect. They did not care that she was an Omega. They cared because she had been there for them when they needed support. "You built a place where people feel valued," Adrian said. Emma smiled. "I only treated them the way I wished others had treated me." Those words reminded Adrian of the mistake he had made. He had lived in a world where titles often decided someone's importance. Emma had lived in a world where actions revealed someone's true character. That difference had changed him. Later that evening, Adrian received a message from Silvermoon Palace. Several nobles requested his return, concerned about the future of the kingdom. They wanted the Alpha King back in his position, and expected him to restore the traditions they understood. Adrian knew returning would not be simple. The palace was the place where he had once allowed expectations to control his choices. But this time he would return differently. When he shared the news with Emma, she became quiet. "You are going back," she said softly. Adrian nodded. "Yes. But I am not going back as the same person who left." Emma looked at him carefully. "And what happens when the palace reminds you of everything before?" Adrian took a moment before answering. "Then I will remember what I learned here." He looked around the peaceful village that had helped him understand what truly mattered. "I learned that being a king is not about standing above everyone. It is about standing with them." Emma felt something change inside her. For so long, she had feared that Adrian would return to the crown and forget the lessons he had learned. But now she saw something different. He was not asking her to follow him back because he needed someone to complete his image. He was asking her to believe in the person he was becoming. Before leaving, Adrian made one final promise. "I will not ask you to return until you know you have a choice." Emma looked surprised. Those words meant everything because they showed her that he finally understood. Love was not about keeping someone close because they belonged to you. It was about respecting them enough to let them choose. As Adrian prepared to return to Silvermoon, the kingdom waited for its Alpha King. But they did not know that the man returning was not the same ruler who had walked away. He had left searching for Emma. He was returning with a deeper understanding of himself. And for the first time, the future of Silvermoon would be shaped not by expectation, but by truth. The return to Silvermoon Palace was a moment the entire kingdom had been waiting for. When Adrian Blackwood walked through the royal gates, everyone expected to see the same Alpha King who had left weeks before. They expected the same ruler who placed duty above everything, the same man who followed traditions because they were easier than questioning them. But the person who returned carried a different presence. Adrian was still the Alpha King. He still held the responsibility of protecting and guiding Silvermoon. Yet there was a calmness in him that had not existed before. He no longer carried the crown as a burden that separated him from everyone else. He carried it as a responsibility to serve. The nobles quickly noticed the difference. During meetings, Adrian listened more carefully. He asked questions instead of assuming he already had every answer. He considered the voices of ordinary people instead of only the opinions of powerful families. The kingdom began seeing the changes that came from the quiet lessons he had learned away from the palace. But there was one question everyone wanted answered. What would happen with Emma Whitmore? Many believed the Alpha King would return alone and move forward with the future they had planned before. They expected him to continue the path chosen during the royal ceremony. Instead, Adrian surprised the entire court. He stood before the nobles and spoke honestly about the mistake he had made. A ruler can make decisions for a kingdom, but a person must also take responsibility for the choices made with the heart, Adrian said. The room became silent. The Alpha King had never openly admitted uncertainty before, but he no longer believed admitting a mistake made him weaker. He understood that true leadership required honesty. Meanwhile, Emma remained in the countryside, uncertain about what would happen next. She had heard about Adrian's return and the changes within the palace. Part of her felt hopeful, but another part reminded her of the pain she had experienced before. She did not want to return simply because the Alpha King finally realized her importance. She wanted to know that she was valued even without a crown waiting for her. Adrian understood this better than anyone. When he invited Emma back to Silvermoon, he did not present it as an order from the Alpha King. He presented it as a choice from Adrian. If you return, he told her, it should be because you want to build a future here, not because you feel obligated. Emma looked at him quietly. The man standing before her was the same person she once cared for, but he was also someone who had changed. He was no longer asking her to fit into his world. He was trying to create a world where she belonged. When Emma finally returned to Silvermoon, the kingdom saw her differently. She was no longer the Omega who had been overlooked. She was the person who had inspired the Alpha King to become a better leader. The nobles who once questioned her began recognizing the qualities they had ignored. They saw her compassion, her wisdom, and her ability to connect with people in a way no title could create. Yet the most important change was not how the kingdom viewed Emma. It was how Adrian viewed her. He no longer saw her as someone who completed his life. He saw her as someone with her own dreams, her own strength, and her own choice. And as the kingdom prepared for a new chapter, everyone understood one important truth. The Alpha King had not found Emma again because she belonged to him. He found her because he finally learned how to truly value her. The new chapter of Silvermoon Kingdom began with a truth that changed the way everyone viewed the Alpha King and the Omega who stood beside him. Adrian Blackwood had once believed that being a great ruler meant making the choices everyone expected from him. He believed tradition was the foundation of strength, and that personal feelings had to remain behind the walls of responsibility. But his journey away from the palace had taught him something far more valuable. A kingdom could have laws, traditions, and power, but it could only truly thrive when the people within it felt seen and valued. Emma Whitmore became the greatest reminder of that lesson. When she returned to Silvermoon, she did not return as someone seeking approval. She did not return because she needed a place beside the throne. She returned because she chose to, and that choice meant more to Adrian than any royal announcement ever could. He understood that her presence was not a reward he had earned. It was a gift that he had to continue respecting every day. Over time, the kingdom changed because Adrian and Emma changed together. The Alpha King became known not only for his authority, but also for his willingness to listen. He created a future where people were not judged only by their family name, their position, or their status. He remembered the lessons Emma had shown him long before she ever stood beside the crown. Meanwhile, Emma remained the same person she had always been. She continued helping others, offering kindness, and reminding the kingdom that compassion was not a weakness. Many who once overlooked her began seeing the strength that had always existed within her. They realized that she had never needed a title to have value. Her worth had been there from the beginning. One evening, Adrian and Emma returned to the same quiet place where they had first shared honest conversations. The garden that once held memories of uncertainty now represented growth and hope. Adrian looked at Emma and smiled. "Do you ever think about how different everything could have been?" he asked. Emma looked at the flowers around them. "I think about it sometimes, but I also think we needed to learn what we did." Adrian nodded. He knew she was right. If he had never lost her, he might never have understood the importance of truly seeing her. If Emma had never walked away, she might never have discovered her own strength. Their journey was not about a perfect beginning. It was about creating something stronger after understanding what they had almost lost. Across Silvermoon Kingdom, their story became a reminder passed from one generation to the next. It was a story about an Alpha King who learned that power alone could not create happiness. It was a story about an Omega who discovered that being overlooked did not mean being invisible. And it was a story about two people who found their way back to each other because they were willing to grow. In the end, Adrian did not become a better king because he finally found the person he loved. He became a better king because he learned how to love with respect, patience, and understanding. Emma did not become important because she stood beside the Alpha King. She was important because she had always been someone worth choosing. And that was the greatest lesson Silvermoon Kingdom would always remember. The strongest hearts are not the ones that never break. They are the ones that learn, heal, and choose kindness again.